Hey, everybody, before we jump into today's episode, I want to let you know about our upcoming summit classes that are starting in the first week of October. If you don't know or if you haven't heard about it already, Summit is our online trainings that we do for managers and leaders. Each class is about 6 weeks, it's 2 hours every week, and we have 9 plus different topics. But wanted to let you know about these 3 that are coming up real soon. The first is our fundamentals. This is the foundations for leadership. And we still had leaders of 5 to 10 years and leaders of 2 weeks come through this class. The second is our lead speak class. This is our keys to effective communication. How do you improve and keep up your communication as a leader? And then our third newest class is our resolve class. And this is all about finding solution in conflict. So we're really excited about all of these. We hope you check them out. Email us at info@drivenleadership.com, or you can find more information on our website. So that's it for now. Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome back to the Driven Leadership Podcast, everybody. We have a full table this week. Mary's joining the crew to talk about engagement. It's a follow-up episode from last week. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode, I would recommend, encourage, require you to go back and listen to that episode, because we really set the stage to be able to dive in headfirst this week. Last week, we talked about engagement. What is it? How is it measured? What does it look like when you have disengaged employees? So we're talking all about how do you create, maintain, sustain engagement in the business. So where do we want to start? Whenever you guys think about creating and maintaining engagement, what is the first thought you go to whenever we have business owners come to us with that problem, or we see that problem?
Well, the first thought is you have to develop your managers, because everything, we've said this so many times, everything rises and falls on leadership. Yeah. And what is it? Like 70% of engagement is truly impacted by the manager. And so the more engaged that manager is, the more they're connected, the more they love what they're doing, the more engaged it helps create within the team.
I think too, with that is you have to define what you want the outcome to be and honestly care. When I've encountered with different business leaders in the past, and even in myself, I've got to really passionately care about improving the engagement, and not just about the end result and not just about the outcome that it produces, but really care about the individual and care that they get engaged and care that my managers are actually engaged and not just look at them as another cog in the wheel and really see them as people. If you don't have that, you don't have really much to play from in this arena.
Yeah, well, so. And you look at managers, though, in so many companies that we work with, they're stretched so thin and they're exhausted. They might be bought into the vision, they might be bought into the company, yet they have just so much bandwidth. And so how do you help take things off their plate, or help them leverage, or help them delegate so that they have more time? Because it's not that they don't care. A lot of them do care. Well, some of them don't, but a lot of them, they truly care. And yet they're so disconnected because they need to dot those I's, cross those T's, create the results that they're supposed to.
So I've been sitting here listening to you guys, and I'm thinking about this before we came in the podcast, and kind of feel like it's like an onion that you peel back, right? You go, well, I want to create engagement. And so, yes, right where Mary went. So what creates engagement? Well, a great leader has the biggest impact on creating engagement. Well, what's a great leader? And you go, oh, they handle conflict well, and they're they have great connection with their people, and they're all these things. And that's another layer. But then how do they handle stress and pressure? Because that's really when people are evaluating them, is when it hits the fan, how do you show up? Okay, so how do I show up under stress and pressure? And at some point, you get down to the core of who that person is, which is, are they a person about me, or are they a person about we in some way or another? And the more we are about me, and especially under stress and pressure, then the more in some ways we become untrustworthy in a team environment. So, the building's burning down. Am I the person that runs out of the building and saves myself, or just saves my interests? I save my computer, I save my laptop, and I save myself, right? Yeah. Or am I the person while it's burning down that I make sure that I bring as many people with me as I can, and so on and so forth. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it's when we are trained from an early age to sense danger, to sense threats, to who can we build trust with, who's trustworthy, all these type of things. And when we work around people, and we're working around people, and oftentimes more than we are our own families, we're spending time with them. If you think that you're going to lead from a non-authentic place, people know who you are, even if you never show them.
Yeah.
So who are you authentically? And if you are authentically someone, even if you don't always have the right technique or right communication ability or whatever, but if you are this person underneath of substance, of somebody who cares about a bigger purpose, an initiative that connects with why we're working here, and you're doing that well with your team, and you're working with them and also taking into account who they are and demonstrating care like Austin is talking about, and you're bringing it in and accountability and all these things, they just kind of naturally start to show up. So all the skills and techniques stack on top of that. But at its core, you want to create engagement? Are you a good person? Yeah. Are you really a person that is who you say you are, and a person of purpose and a person of more? And when you are, people step into that. I know that's probably not the answer we wanted for this podcast, but for me, that fit.
If that is the core of the onion, then that is, I think, the reality we need to live in. So when we think about practical ways, if we walked into a business and we saw that engagement was a problem, and we saw that the person at the top struggled with the ability to care and to trust people and to look after people, what are the practical steps? Let's even say that they came to Bold and now they're back from Bold. How do you keep the momentum going? What are the practices day to day, week to week that they can do with their team or just individually? Let's start there, like at that core and the best practices there.
Well, I think first you have to go and have a measure on that good person or that care or that concern. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought about this based on Eric's conversation is light your business on fire and determine what you're going to take from your desk. And actually do it. Like light your business on fire.
Don't do that.
And then pull something. And what would you take from your desk? I don't really mean literally, I think, kind of jovially saying that. But really think about that. What would you take? As you were talking, Eric, I was literally looking around my desk and going like, I'll take my books. Would I grab my computer? I don't know. And those are really interesting questions that I think any person has to take into account and really do some self-reflection, because naturally we're going to say, yeah, we care, but do your actions show you care? So, and I know you said, Connor, imagine coming back from Bold, which they have that self-awareness, but just wanted to kind of throw that out there is take some self-account here, put some self-reflection in place, determine if you are that person. And if you are, great. If you're not, that kind of goes to Mary or Eric here of like, what are those next steps?
So can we talk a little bit about motivation? Because engagement connects into motivation, right? What drives a human being. So there's intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic means it's coming from within. Extrinsic means we're motivated from the outside. And so a manager influences their people externally, and they also have the ability to move them internally. Mm-hmm. And so real true engagement has everything to do with the internal intrinsic motivation versus the extrinsic. So I see companies and they're like, man, we have a ping pong table. Okay. And I did this. I managed a sales team. We brought in a ping pong table. We had it. And it was pretty cool to watch because I liked playing ping pong. I was one of the ones that would play this thing. Right. And it was brought in because it was like this point of play that was an external thing that we could all do. What it did internally was it built friendships and bonds because people actually did it. But it was the friendships and the bonds that created engagement. It wasn't the ping pong table. That was the tool that was used to create the bonds. So these companies go, well, we bought a ping pong table. It's not about the ping pong table. It's about, is that building a community of people that actually build relationship and trust, and they care about each other, and they're sitting around joking with each other and they're having fun, and then they go back into work and they push each other and they challenge each other to be better because they care about each other. That's great. If you bring a ping pong table in and a few people play once or twice, and it's more of a recruiting tool than anything. I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so Google's done a ton of stuff with this. Google has this whole community that they've built. You know, they've got a friend of mine started working at Google, a client of ours started working at Google, and then I called a friend. She's forever. We've been working with her and her teams, and when her first day, she took some video and is like going through a tour of campus, and this campus is incredible. You know, the work environment that they're in. There is, you know, they do have the sleep pods, but they have this whole dining area and this, like, I mean, it was like an advanced Starbucks. I don't know what it was, but it was like, there's all this cool stuff that's going on in there. And I'm watching, and there are people that are walking around and they're just doing their thing or whatever. And they have these private rooms where people are working, and yes, they're getting their work done. But I thought the really cool thing were these big tables where people are just sitting around. And they're just kind of building a relationship, and they're communicating. Some are doing work, some are having conversation. I don't know if there was a recent thing that came out and said Google's missed it and they're not producing as much as they used to. So maybe that files into it. But it comes down to, if you are producing the relationship side of it, you typically produce engagement. Engagement is shown to produce results and outcomes. So anyway, I'm rambling. But
wait, can you say that last thing again about engagement produces results and outcomes?
Well, engagement, the whole point of engagement, why do you go after engagement, is because it produces more results. Okay, we were talking about it in the last podcast, right? You get less turnover, less people quit, people have a sense of purpose and engagement. But what creates that is different for each person. So there are some people that get into the work, like an architect that loves the actual, you know, architectural side of it, may spend 10 hours with their computer, and that's a relationship they need to be ultra engaged. But for most people, we need people. And we don't need them all the time, but we need relationships. We need to know, and that's why that manager is such a big deal. Do we have a quality relationship with our manager? So going back to where this started, if you want to create engagement and you're a manager of people, go back to how do you create great relationships? Great relationships stem from being a great person. So you can go do all the right things, but not be a genuine person who actually cares about the relationship. You're just doing it to produce a result. You're not going to get... You're going to get an outcome for a while, and when they realize you're a fraud, when they realize that you don't actually care about them, you just care about the results, you're going to lose the engagement. So when you genuinely care about them, past the goals of the organization, care about what are they, why are they really doing this? What are they after? What are their personal goals? And don't care about it because it helps you reach an end. Care about it because you care about them, you know, and you're in it with them, and you're in the trenches with them as they're going through things. You create something different. And all this, I can just picture a leader looking at all this, and it's soft stuff. It's like, oh, I need to be friends with them. I need to be all this.
And you go buy a ping pong table.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
Or spike ball.
Yeah, or spike ball.
Yeah.
That's a younger team, by the way. If you go older, everybody pulls a muscle. But again, those are just random tools. You could have book club. You could have none of that. You could sit around and just problem solve big business issues, but actually talk to each other. I mean, there's all these different ways to do it. What I'm saying, I want to go to the soft hard thing. So it's not you're not holding them accountable. It's not that you're not pushing performance. What happens is, as you build relationship, you gain the opportunity, the ability to push for higher performance, and that's what we want. Yeah. I want to work with people, and I do. I mean, Austin and Connor, Mary, you push the shit out of me. And I also feel like we have great relationships, right? So it's like, we'll sit here and we'll joke around, we'll do things. But if something's not up to snuff, nobody's holding back. Nobody's going to go, hey, that's not meeting the mark or whatever. We're pushing for what's going on. If somebody's not putting the effort in, which I haven't really dealt with, but it's like, if we had that, I know somebody'd say something. So it's I don't know. I'm stealing all the thunder here. I don't mean to talk nonstop.
I love that the connection here too, like you're talking about just building connection, building authentic connection, but the best vessel to that is figuring out how to have fun with your team. Yep. And that inherently sounds soft. And I've heard business owners say like, well, that's just a waste of money or a waste of time. We're trying to be more efficient. We're not trying to have fun. I can't waste my time on this. Or I've seen companies do like happy hours, especially through COVID and virtual teams. They do happy hours because there's innately, they know there's a need to have fun and a need to build connection, but they can't find the right thing. So that's why it's like, yeah, you don't need to go buy a ping pong table. You may not need to do a happy hour. I actually love the idea of like bring your team together and brainstorm a tough problem. Like a lot of people would have fun with that. I know Austin would get absolutely fired up if it was just for fun, you know? And so
that.
having that as the vessel to create engagement, that is such an important piece that is hard to get right for your team. It takes trial and error, but it's so valuable when you nail it, because then it's just a snowball effect for the whole team.
I think about what really creates engagement. Yes, that authentic, caring, great person, but it's time. You know, the most valuable thing, the gift that we can give people is time. And whether it's a one-on-one, how you doing, whether it's, my mind is just going, swirling with companies that we worked with that have created the time. So the leader, the manager, stops what they're doing. They do spike ball in the parking lot or have a ping pong table, or they go out to lunch or have lunch brought in, or, you know, just different things that create this element of I see you, I care about you as a person. And then as a result, because fun equals creativity. I mean, studies show over and over and over, that when you have fun, and there's an element of play, that our brains think differently. And so to do that, now you can collaborate, because that time is valuable. That people want to be seen, you know, and think about the vision. So you buy into the vision, you buy into the company, you buy into your people. On the flip side, my brain goes to people who have created disengagement. So they've been really in the trenches with their teams. They get too busy. In fact, there was one company that we were actually brought into, and it was his gatekeeper that he had been talked to about Bold or having us come in. And she goes, she's the gatekeeper, so she's doing all these different things. And I'm asking for the problem, because she's like, oh my gosh, he's the best leader. You know, he does all these things. He's written books. People respect him. And I said, okay, so what's the gap? And she goes, we've grown so much that we were a family, and now we have over 120 employees. And he'll say, let's go do a team building, and it could be happy hour, so bring a happy hour in. And he doesn't show up. So all the people were so excited to hang out with the owner because he was, you know, it was the founder. And now they go, he doesn't care, and it's time. And so I really believe the very first thing that when we look at our teams, you as a leader, that check, right? Are you giving people time? Are you really connecting? I think of another company who they want to do everything right, but they won't delegate. So the leadership, they go to stop, they do team building, but then they go right back into command and control, and it's not producing the outcome that they want.
Yeah, it's really interesting. What came to mind is there's actually a quote. It's and to be loved but not known is superficial, right? To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved, that's what humans need. And I'm, you know, when we're thinking in the realm of context, right? I'm not saying to go fully know and love your team. That sounds weird. But what I am saying is, I mean, or go fully know and love them. But what I mean by that is, or thinking about that is that's our human desire innate in its core. And if we don't meet those needs to our people, that's where conflict arises. And it's not, you know, I was thinking about a leader that I've worked with in the past, and they had all the things. If you looked at their business from the outside, they should have engagement, because they didn't have the ping pong tables, but they had quarterly events and monthly this, and they had scorecards and all the things to know exactly where everybody was and all of the measurements. But when I went into the company, they asked, hey, what do you see? What's missing? because it's not creating engagement. Well, the gap is care. They don't feel heard. They don't feel cared for. They don't feel valued. They don't feel a part of anything. And there's Zappos had this 4 principles that they lived by that created, the shoe company.
Zappos the shoe.
Yeah, and they wrote a book, Delivering Happiness. It's great, but he kind of led with 4 big principles that dictated his culture, and we actually brought those into multiple organizations I've worked with, and the principles are just timeless truths. And one of the biggest ones there of the 4 is connected to something, involved in something, being a part of something. We all, whether we want to believe it or not, and you don't realize this most of the time until it's gone, but we find our identity in what we do, especially as driven people, especially as leaders. And so when we're identifying in that, we want to be collectively identified as that thing. And when we're not, causes some really large gaps, and you're not going to solve those with any tool, to your point, Eric, that can come. You have to peel back that onion all the way down to the core, start hearing, start loving, start listening, start being there in time, to your point, Mary. And that's when it starts to build momentum and steam.
Can we flip this a little bit and talk about what tangibly creates disengagement? Because I think
sometimes you have to know what you don't have.
We touched it a little bit last episode, but we can definitely get more nitty.
It just can it connects. So, and I'm generalizing, but most of the time when we go into a company and you're seeing disengaged people, it's because everything Austin was just talking about, right? It's that they don't feel. It's the other end of this. They don't feel. They feel almost like a number. They're told what to do. They don't make a lot of decisions. The choices are taken away from them. When they have ideas, they're shut down. There's not a collaborative environment they're being brought into. So we're talking about
trust.
There's no trust, but and it goes both ways, right? The respect can be low, and things set them off to where they interpret it as disrespect. And when that happens, conflict isn't handled well. Like all these things snowball,
and that's it just feels like the biggest uphill battle to be like a manager or a leader in that position, because you're like, I don't know what to do, and I don't know how to.
So if you're, to your point, so if you're a manager, and let's say you're a new manager and you're walking in and that's the team you're inheriting, which isn't uncommon, right? There's a reason the manager is out of there.
Yeah.
And you're walking into a team that's disengaged. Well, very first thing we're doing is a lot of nothing. Meaning we're watching, we're listening. And that's a lot more than nothing. But I'm saying what people do is they come in and they want to take action. They want to move the needle. They want to do things.
You blow the whole thing up.
and it's like, that's not the place to be, because even though you're in a place of transition and wanting to start fresh, the people that are there need to transition to trust. They need to let go of whatever they were in the middle of. You got to figure out what you're walking into. You know, it's like you walked into a giant pit of nastiness, and then you're just pouring sand over the top and thinking it's going to work. It could work, but more than likely it's just going to create more problems. So you got to do all that. But once you do that and you're there, now it's, while you're doing it, you're building relationship. Listening builds relationships. And then you're listening and you're actually caring about what's going on. And sometimes they're going to come in and they're going to talk about stuff you really don't care about. Well, that's okay. But you're getting to know them. It does produce a result. There is a reason for it. You know, you're in it, and you start doing that, and you do a lot of listening for months. You know, and that drives people crazy sometimes. But you come in because you're an action leader. I get it, but you build the foundation of connection and trust and understanding, and they know they can come there and they can talk about whatever they need to talk about. And you're getting somewhere with that. Great. And again, not to manipulate them, to authentically build that foundation. Now you go to them and you go, hey, all right, I've been looking at what's going on. This process we're doing is not working, and I want to shift it to over here, but I want to get your thoughts. What's your concerns on doing this? They have a voice in it. We create the new system. We go after it. We collaborate, and we're working on those. And then we start executing on them, and people start getting bought in. And that's another big piece of, you get into engagement, is autonomy. I have to choose, right? If I
yeah.
choose what I'm doing, then it works. When I'm forced into what I'm doing, you must turn left. Okay, I'll turn left because I signed on to do that. I'll do what you tell me. But that's not a human being. Human being goes, I want to choose to go left. So give me the information, bring me into the conversation, and tell me why left and right were the choices, and let's choose left together. So the more we can do that, the more engaged people get.
And it's really about creating those systems that do that, right? And I hate to go back to Zappos, but you literally just teed it up perfectly. I feel like we prepared this, but we didn't, just out there for if you're curious. But that's the Zappos piece of perceived control. If they see their ability to control and have a perceived outcome, and that's important, that their perception is reality. So whether they feel like they can do it really matters, even if the reality is you're steering that ship, but they have a perceived level of control because of the relationship. They can come to you and ask questions and respond. That's the perception of control, and they're a part of moving the ship. People want to be a part of it, and that's just one of many ways. But I've seen that really turn tides. When you give some autonomy in business, it starts turning people's ears perk up. They're like, I want to be a part of that. What were you saying, Mary? I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's okay. So when Eric was talking about what creates disengagement, and then he talked about change, what flew into my brain was the change curve, right? And so when there's change, and if there's change in the helm, and there's change in the role, and there's more change in the role, whether and I just had a conversation with one of the college sports teams that we're going to be working with, and they had a brand new team, came in, but there was 4 coaches in a row. So every year there was a new coach, and he could not get the players to open up. And that's human nature when you're in change, and whether it's a manager and they fire the manager and they bring a new manager in, human nature is to protect, because it becomes painful if our ideas are not heard, if we're not valued. Why they've promised us this and we work so hard and we're not seeing the results, we're not getting the tools. So there's that time piece, but you have to build the trust, because the change curve says, for the sake of it, something happens, first you're numb, then you go into, the frustration, anger is where a lot of times people will live, because we know that emotion. So in a business, within a team, if there's multiple change and we're not getting the results, people will go into that frustrated state, and we self-protect. Then we go into the numbness, disengagement. We're in that protection mode. We will never go into creativity. We will never open up until we can see that there's a little bit of hope. And once there's that hope, now we can go, oh my gosh, they really do want to. No, you really do want to hear from me. My leader just texted me or called me at home to find out how my kid was doing because my kid's sick. I mean, that's care. And when it's consistent behavior, we get a leader that, they have great ideas, they're new, and they might do it one time, but is it consistent? Consistency in who you are and the actions. And then when someone brings something, are you going to do something? Now when someone feels like they're heard and valued and someone's got their back, now you've created more engagement.
Yeah. To go back, Eric, for a second, you gave the 3-4 plans of like do a lot of nothing, build a relationship, form a plan, execute the plan, have involvement. You set that up in the context of like a new leader, new manager coming in. Do you think that's possible for an existing leader to do in the midst of their current position?
Yeah, if they genuinely are looking to do a restart, right? So let's say I've been leading and have been hyper controlling, or I've upset the apple cart, and for whatever reason it's just not good. I've decreased trust because of how I'm leading. Okay, that's what's happened. And I'm looking, I don't want to get rid of the team because that is an option. Some leaders choose it. Get rid of the whole team, bring a new one in because I did a bad job. Okay. You will do that.
They gone.
So you go, no, these guys and girls are good and I want to do something with it. I screwed up. I want to dig out of that. Well, you got to draw a line in the sand. So that's usually, okay, if I'm genuinely going to do this different, you can do the same thing, but you go back to them, you go, look, you own your part of it. Here's what I did. Here's how I messed up. Here's what went on. Here's what I'm going to do different. And here's what you can count on from me moving forward. And then you just don't miss. Whatever you committed to, you hit. And when you start hitting it and you start genuinely asking questions and you start listening and they see a change from you, for sure. The problem is, to do that change, most people can't do it. Most people want to justify the bad behavior, and the bad behavior is still there. So they need a catalyst for, to have like a complete shift. And again, we're doing self-promotion. Bold does that. You go in there, and I'm serious. I've seen so many people do it, and they're like, man, I've created, whether at home or whether at work, I've created this. I want to make a shift. I come out of this class, I've got the realization, and they just go back and they go, man, I screwed this up bad. And if you'll give me another shot, here's what I'm committing to. And they follow through with it, and they authentically go after it. It works. But you need a catalyst to shift. So if you just show up one day and you go, all right, we're doing it different. I screwed up. Okay, here we go. They're kind of looking at you like you need something there. It's got to be, they got to know you mean it. But if you do, I think you can do it right there.
The problem is if you don't do it, right? There's a massive risk versus reward in that second option, because you may have upset the apple cart and you may have created some distrust, but you really want to create disengagement and a zero trust. Go in, say you're going to make an adjustment, and don't do it. There is nothing that will lose followership more than not keeping your commitment to change if there's frustration around that thing that you're saying you're going to change.
And that furthers Mary's point of the change curve of, when you were talking about that, Mary, it's really easy for team members and managers to stay in that frustrated place. It kind of makes work a little easier just to be able to come in and complain about shit all day long and just be numb to it. It's a lot harder to get them to especially if you're coming from this situation of I've created mistrust and created disengagement. It's a lot harder to steer that ship. So, I mean, I would think that it's going to take longer if you're in an existing position and you're looking to steer the ship around than if you were a new manager coming in and you kind of had that clean slate to start with.
I think
Ooh, everybody's
let's go. We're in.
Well, I think that's the perception, Connor, and I don't know if it is reality, because you're coming in with the same thing and the time is the same. And I think that's where managers mess up sometimes, is they're like, well, if I leave my current position and I go to another position, it will be easier for me to create because I'll have a clean slate. And then you do the same thing over and over again without taking the time to start at the beginning. And then you're just in this vicious cycle of restart every time it gets hard. And I've seen leaders in that place. And so I would say, if you're in that boat where you're just frustrated, do everything in your control. We talk about it in Bold. We talk about it in our programs. We talk about our training and everything that we do. It's focus on what you can control. What's the 1% that you can do to make impact? And maybe that is just going and owning it. And go and own it. You don't have to commit to change. Just go own it. Right? That's the start, right? Now, you need to commit to making some changes and differences, but ask questions and just own something is a huge step in the right direction for a lot of leaders.
I also think even understanding their communication style, so the advanced insights, one of the easiest tools that we work with within leaders, and they eat it up, the team eats it up, is understanding how to communicate with your people.
It's a cheat code.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. If you have a high C, you better back it up with facts and data. And to your point, own your shit. If you don't know something, tell them you don't know and figure it out. If someone's a high S, give them as much time and the whys behind what you're asking them to do to change. Because right now they need stability. It is such a cheat code. The high I's, my gosh, they're the ones that want to go to happy hour with you. They want you to sit at their desk and go, hey, how was your weekend? Like, connect. High C might not want that. But yeah, it's such a cheat code. And the more, because a lot of times what we do is we come from the way we like to communicate, our communication style, and we get so frustrated with our team members because they don't get it the way we do, when you can just stop and pause and go, how do I connect to their method of understanding, speak their language? And as soon as you do that, it's like, whoa, Eric cares about me.
Thanks. Yeah, I most days. I actually want to go back, Austin. You were talking about if somebody says, they're digging out of the hole they're in, and they commit to things, and then they don't follow through with the commitment. It's actually, in that case, the best way you can create engagement almost immediately after doing that by quitting, because that's you're kind of your only way out. So if you're gonna commit and then you're not gonna do it, and that's after your second round, you've lost your team. And the reason I say that, people go, well, I want to create engagement, but you've been leading and committing to things and not following through or missing the mark over and over and over again. And then you go, well, I'm just going to change it. And now maybe you did really change it, but you just expect that team to come along and be engaged after you've burnt them over and over again. It's not a fair ask, So every situation is a little bit different, going back to all the way back to the beginning, Connor, we're talking about, new person coming in some ways is easier because it's a simple roadmap. Listen, understand, build a relationship. When you start digging out of the potholes you've created because you've not done your job as a leader and you haven't owned it or you haven't done different things and you've got to dig out of that, it gets much more complex. And I'm not encouraging everybody to quit their job because it's hopeless. It's people relations. But I will say, you take same thing. If you took a marriage and, I don't know, you cheat on your spouse, there's some people that are able to work that out. There are. But I think we'd all agree that's a very low percentage. They broke their trust in the worst way. And trust is character and competence. And in that case, they broke both. They're not competent enough to follow through with what they said they do in the marriage, and they don't have the character, the values of a person who'd be honorable and integrity enough to hold to it, right? So you're breaking that trust, and you broke it that deep, really hard to recover from. You're at work. Yeah, go ahead.
And then it carries into other relationships, because now, like how we do anything, how we do everything, you've had that, and it's harder to open up to another person. So we have the same behavior because we're self-protective. Anyways,
No, so just saying that, and I'm using that as an example because that's kind of an extreme version of it, but relationships are built on trust. Trust is how we evaluate their character and competence to handle a situation. We might, I always use this, is I might trust someone to drive, if I had a young son, drive him to school because they're an excellent driver and they're a good person. But I might not have them take over my job at work because they're not any good. In my case, it's speaking to people or whatever it is, right? So that's the competence part. The character part, if someone is someone we know that, I don't know, they have a record of lying, cheating, stealing, and all this stuff, I probably don't have them drive my son to school because I don't want the influence around them. So when you're talking about building trust at work, and its foundation for engagement is they've got to be a person who has character. That goes back to the people part. Are you a good we person versus me person, and have good values that connect into what we need here in this environment? Or are you the me person that the values don't align? It's all about you, and it's about moving your career forward. Those are real hard to put together. That's why you take cultures like within the NFL, for example. It's a very me culture that they're forcing a we mindset over the top of, and then every year they change it again because all the contracts, you switch teams. Yeah. So it's forcing a bunch of people to work really well together to be experts at their craft so much that they can overcome the lack of chemistry that often happens in teams like that. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. I feel like I could ramble forever on
this. I have a question for the three of you, because this goes into this whole thing. So let's say you have a really engaged culture. You have an engaged team, except for one or two people.
Fire 'em.
And no matter
Yeah.
what you're doing, and they're amazing within their job and their role, but they will not engage. So what do you do?
Fire 'em. No,
Let's say that.
no. Okay, so
because
you
we
go,
see that, right?
but you go through. I mean, there's a straight process. It's like you go through. You talk to them about it. You make them aware. Give them specifics. Give them the feedback. Work with them. If they're not making the change, here's the thing: you have an engaged culture. You protect the culture. No matter what, no matter, you go, it's your top salesperson. And I know we give examples like this and we do process around it. They're your top person. You protect the culture. And when you protect the culture rises to the occasion. I've seen it too many times at this point. I'm like, there are times where you've got to kind of mitigate it for a month or two as you're getting somebody in place or you're doing different things to make it work. But you protect the culture at all. That's my opinion. Y'all can disagree by all means, but
we see this. Like we see it with athletic teams where their top player will not engage. And it's more like the quiet quitter. So you have this engaged, the great group, they're coming together, you're doing your thing, but they're off to doing their own thing, but they're the top talent. Same thing within teams, the top sales. And it's not that you can fire them or kick them off. They're just, so how do you bridge that gap? Because that's, Connor, this is what this is, right? How do you create engagement and sustain it?
Yeah, it's definitely moving into the sustainability piece.
I'm definitely with Eric. If you've done everything you can as a leader to engage them, but that is a massive caveat. That is a very quick sentence, but a very long string of action. If you have done everything in your power to change it. And what I mean that is, have you asked the right questions? Have you sought? Have you been curious? Have you give them perceived control? Have you give them, and the aspect we haven't really talked about a lot is perceived progress. Do they see us moving forward with you as their leader? Are they interconnected? Do they feel involved? Do they feel superior or inferior? All of those things, and then mitigating those little things as you go. Are the expectations clear? If you've done all of that and you can honestly say as the leader, yes, they are 100% there, then gone. They need to be gone, but 90% of leaders can't say that. Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
And all those things, and you're doing all that super quick. It is not, we're taking 6 months and I'm going through and doing all this, because the rest of the team, you got to protect them. But to your point, Merritt, there are two different things. Okay, so we were just with a team that had an amazing winning culture. Okay, they crushed it from the winning standpoint. From the actual getting along, working well together part, and they weren't that great. And athletic teams, especially in NCAA, they're together for a year max. A lot of times it's 3 or 4 months. Sometimes you can hold your breath for 3 or 4 months for talent. Your number one player is an absolute asshole to everybody on the team. You can kind of insulate them in a bubble, and it makes it so you win a trophy, you do whatever. That's what the team's about, and that's what they deal with within sports. They have to deal with these personalities because talent sometimes trumps within sports. In business, where it's different, is we're living our lives with these people. I mean, we're spending 8 hours a day for years together. And so when you ruin the culture, you can ruin massive productivity, years worth of work, relationships, all these type of things. So it has a different meaning.
We've worked with a couple companies that had super engaged cultures. They had done different things to really create this family, this bond, crazy results. And then they hire like a new GM. And because there's a place that's missing within, the structure, the SOPs or whatever. And that person pushes so many buttons and they're the standout. And instead of creating this engaged culture that they had, there's 2 companies that I am thinking of the top of my brain, and I watched it implode. And because the leadership invested so much in these GMs, they hung on to them, and then they started losing some of their team members.
Where you get put in that corner of like, well, we've spent so much money, we have this big salary, we can't afford to lose them, so we're just gonna let it play out. And it's every month. It's like, well, we'll let it play out. We'll let it play out. And then you lose people.
That's what I was going to say. More than having the rock star that has no self-awareness and is just a complete idiot when it comes to dealing with people, in organizations I've worked with or have been in, that's been way less because they're just so repelled. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, we got to get them out of the door. Yeah, or they leave for a better opportunity, in air quotes, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
What I found, though, where I see this is a manager or a high-level leader, to Mary's point, that comes in that isn't doing well, whether that's because of people or they're not getting results, but with the justification of, we've already invested this much money, I don't want to move them out. We have to see this thing all the way through. We have to, but they're not. The reason why they're not great for the culture isn't because they're not relationally good, but because they're in this leadership role and they're not following up with their commitments and they're not hitting results. People don't see progress. And so I would say, just in general, there is this level of, you have the soft, you have the care, you have the friendship, you have the relationship, you have all of these other things. But when you're talking about leaders and managers, there has to be this level of, man, we're getting stuff done, we're moving forward, we're making it happen. And if those things aren't happening, it's only going to create disengagement to keep them. There is a balance in all of this as well at times. So,
so going back to that scenario, right? And I've actually seen that scenario. Is the
a few
GM?
times.
Yeah, the GM comes in, or whoever it is, new leader comes in, and they're being brought in to drive results. You know, we get great culture, everything's great, but we got to hit our marks too. And that's why care is important, but so is accountability to performance. And so they come in, they go, we're missing accountability to performance. So they start bringing the accountability, but they never did the work on the relationship. They're just, because they got to hit the mark. They got to hit accountability. So come in with the strong hand. And the strong hand doesn't mean they're yelling at everybody every day. It just means they're pushing to accountability, and it doesn't work in that order. You have to go relationship, then you earn the right to hold to a high standard of accountability. You can do that quickly. It doesn't, and Mary's talking about, you need to put time in. Sometimes we don't have the time. So what do you need to do? You need to have real conversations. You need to sit down and you need to have the real stuff. I've got to push. This is where I'm coming from. Here's why I'm doing it. I want to know how to do it. I want to be helpful. I don't want to just be the guy that's coming in doing this stuff. And when you do it right, you can push quickly, you can earn the right, but you got to do that first. And
it's so funny.
Yeah.
It's so funny you said that. In Chick-fil-A, you just made me think about this. Massive company known for really great cultures throughout their organizations. But a phrase they use all the time is, you have to earn the right to go right. And what that means is, they have these operational pillars, these 3 marks of their success. And you can find this online if you want to look it up. But the first pillar is operational excellence. We have to earn the right with the guests to continue on this journey with them. We have to earn the right with our team to continue on the journey with them. And those are the simple things first. So if you want to create engagement in culture, right, what does that look like? What's that first pillar? For me, I've always noticed it's schedule. If your scheduling's off, if your pay's off, if you're not doing the simple things right of care and control and concern and accountability, results, even, like, that's the first level there. And you have to earn the right to continue on. And then they had second mile service, which was all the extra things that Chick-fil-A is known for doing. But if you don't do the first thing, you can't do the second thing. And then really going into the last one is emotional connections marketing. That's the cow and all this fun stuff that people are connected to at the end of the day with the brand. But if you don't do the other things right, they won't be with you through that whole journey through. So the question I would have for, if we were going to create that for engagement, what would the first pillar be? And then what's the second pillar? And what's the third pillar?
Well, I think we kind of outlined it. To me, I don't know, Mary, you may see it different, but it's self growth. I'm plugging the holes. I'm in a growth mindset, meaning I don't have it all together, but I'm working on things and I'm open about working on it. Pillar 1 is about,
has to start with you.
Me, and then 2 is build the relationships, and then 3 is I mean, you can do this simultaneously though, but it's putting a plan together. But 3 is earning the right, and it's holding accountability to high performance. So it's the goals and the marks. I don't know, Mayor, would you see that different?
No, I agree. Working on yourself first, then you have to have the relationship. And all that we've been talking about is time. It's the connective tissue. It could be fun, right? But then there has to be a standard. There has to be accountability, because if it's all fun and you're not holding the standard, then all of a sudden now the leadership gets pissed off, and then the team is wondering why all of a sudden things aren't going. So there, it really does have to have a balance.
That handbrake of like, oh wait, I thought we were having fun, and now everybody's pissed off because we didn't hit goals.
I guess the way we're saying that is all 3 of those are happening at separate times, and they're not. They're all happening at the same time. I'm working.
But one can't happen without. But you can't have accountability. Or I mean, you can't have accountability. You can't have healthy accountability if you didn't first work on the connection first. Like once you put all 3 on, then they can all go.
I sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I don't want people to picture it's like, oh, I'm going to go away on sabbatical for 6 months and work on me and come back. No, I need to start having awareness. I need to own what I'm working on. I need to have those things going on. Simultaneously, I'm working on a relationship and building trust with people. And then when somebody's underperforming, and it may be too early, I may not have great trust, but I got to still hold the accountability while I'm working on the trust. And we're doing all this. Yes, you need high trust to open the door to high accountability, but that doesn't mean I don't hold them accountable because the trust isn't in place, because it won't work that way. So we've got to have, it just escalates as it goes along. It's like it's getting more and more intense. Yeah.
Well, and I think too, with
fine little dance.
It is, and I think too with the accountability, you have to give the team the whys. This is why we're doing it. Because if all of a sudden you go to hold a level up of accountability, a standard, and nobody understands why, they're not going to buy in.
Yeah. That's a good point.
And I want to say one more thing to the individual, that we're not perfect. And so many times as leaders, and this it made me think of the podcast that we did with Vanitas when he was talking about goals, right? And taking care of ourselves. As a leader, sometimes we make mistakes. So this is where you give yourself grace. Figure out what grounds you to who you are so that you have more to give to your teams.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I'm perfect. It's not.
Yeah, right. King McGrath. King McGrath. We bow to you.
That's why we're required to call him King McGrath on all company meetings, on all emails.
I know it's autonomy. You have a choice. You can.
You can do it or you get fired. It's pretty simple.
I have a choice between King McGrath or Mr. President McGrath. As we land the plane here on engagement, any other thoughts as it pertains to sustainability, and if you have any like real life examples, case studies that you guys have seen in companies of practices that they do to sustain accountability, what are those? What are the final thoughts here as we wrap it up? Our two-part series here.
Yeah, I think about Frank Harrison in the General way back when we used to work with him. He was one of the most authentic, amazing leaders who created a culture of an engagement and sustainability. So it was top down. Frank would work on himself. In fact, Frank is 81, 82 now?
Yeah, I don't know.
And he was going through leadership classes in his 60s. He came through Bold. He came through Forge. But he would do whatever he was asking other people to do. Yeah. So he would grow. He would raise his lid of leadership. Then he would work on his people. And he would do things like they would give back to the community as a team. He would do barbecues. He would have things at his lake. I mean, it was just amazing. But what he also did is he would hold weekly meetings. And in that weekly meeting, there was always, here's a teaching moment, here's actions, here's things that we need. And he was one guy, I'll never forget, we went to one of his meetings, and at 7 o'clock, he shut the door. And if anyone was late, they had to sit on the stairs. They could not come into the meeting. So he created this ripple effect within the culture, and it sustained. They held each other accountable. One of the best leaders I've ever known.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Frank, because for years we got to work with Frank, and we'd go in there and we'd look. I'd walk in there and I go, man, nobody does it as well as you, Frank. Yeah. I mean, like nobody. I'd still say that the best at building a culture. And we learned a lot about what were the ingredients. How do you take actual training and does it translate into building a culture? And that's where a lot of but you start looking at him as a case study, and he was absolutely fantastic. And I still say he's still probably number one. I mean, it's just like the way he did it, what he did. And anybody that knows Frank Harrison, you know that's true. Like, you literally know that's true, and you would have worked for him no matter what. You know, there's another one, and it's a completely different type of culture. It's a company called Templar Shield, which we've worked on and off with at different times. A guy named Nick Friedman. So Nick came through one of our classes when he worked for another company, and he came through and he just got his head straight, and he's like, I'm going to start a company because that's what I want to do. And he started this company, and God, you talk about success. I mean, and you also talk about not success. So he had this massive success, blew this company up, was building a culture, and then he had a partner, and it all went sideways. And they went from, I don't remember the numbers, but it was tens of millions of dollars to almost nothing. And then he went back and rebuilt it, got new partners, but was learning the culture of the level of having awesome partners. But what they do, he has a different type of culture than what Frank did. Frank was kind of the grassroots. I mean, it's HVAC. It's that, and there's a different culture there that's very connected to family, and we're all there. They do cybersecurity, and it's more in the, it's more in the tech side where people are coming in for a season. It's more like the NFL. People come in and they're getting this on their resume, and so they're a good draft choice for the next company that they hop
And
for.
they're remote.
And they're remote, and they're doing
company.
all this. But it's still the same principles. Yeah. They are really good people. They genuinely care. They're working on themselves. Their structure is amazing. How they run their operation, their clarity of plan, their clarity of execution, the whole operation side of their business is like nothing I've ever seen. And I mean, I could be wrong, but last I heard they were over 100 million, and they were like, and just crushing it, And so giving you two extremes there. One, Frank built a family. It was a small business that grew into the 20, 30, $40 million range. Whereas Nick built this, and I haven't probably talked to him in a year, so God only knows what they've done in the last year, but he's building this incredible thing to go compete with the big dogs out there in cybersecurity, and he's made a name for himself. He's cutting it in. And they're the same principles that work. They're just applied differently for their environment, for what they need, and for the people and what they've got going on. So, and I don't know, it just works. It works.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Love those. Those are two very opposites, but I love it because it's the same principles, like you said. It's the same foundations in place, and they can present very differently, but still so effective. So, Austin, any last thoughts on sustaining engagement?
I think just in the stories highlight that, and even what you said, Connor, like just highlighted this reality that a lot of times when we're talking about creating and sustaining engagement, we tend to determine that you have to fit in a certain type of box as a type of individual, right? If you think of a leader who creates engagement, you're going to think of these certain principles or this certain way of being in order to fit in that. And what those two stories show, and what I've seen consistently through my leadership journey, is it's just about being authentically who you are and applying these things to your authentic self, not changing your authentic self. There's value in who you are, and it's getting the miscommunication, it's getting the lack of care or the things that are perceived as lack of care out of the way, so that your true authentic self can show you actually care. And so just be cautious to for a long time, I was in this boat, and I've known a lot of leaders like this that will adjust their person in order to fit the mold, and that's only sustainable for a short amount of time. So to create sustaining engagement, have to be true to who you are, and really understand what that means, and really do the hard work of reflection in that. So, and if you're willing to do that and willing to show up in that way, your team will show up in that way, because what you lead out of is what you lead others to. And so lead out of that place, and you will have way more engagement than not. So.
I like that we're ending. I feel like that's a really nice kind of bow to end on, of like everything we've said. If you take this and apply it as a mask that you need to wear as a leader or a manager, that is putting yourself on the fast track to burnout.
Yeah.
And it's just not gonna last. Like, these are the things we're talking about are why the first pillar is self-improvement, is you have to look in the mirror first, and you have to change yourself first. Everything else will crumble if you don't do that. Very important step. So, well, this has been awesome. I love a little series action, back to backers. We want to hear from you guys listening about your own engagement stories. We want to hear about the things that we didn't cover that you need help with, or the engagement processes, systems that you have in place that really work for your business. We'll do a follow-up episode based on responses that we get. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Eric and Mary and Austin, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thank you.